All right, in this video, we're going to preview the best games on Friday. Now, in the list I have here of the games, I've tried to line them up in sequential order of when these best games will occur. Unfortunately, they're in Australian time. So on my Saturday at 2:30 a.m., if I get up, that's when the first, I think, good game will happen. So what I've done is use the point spreads to identify the best games. I've put in two other games that I'm interested in seeing as well, but these will just line up straight after another. I'll give you a pick on these games who I would be taking, but we're going to go Nerdville like I usually do, and I just want to give you the numbers of each team. So I'll go through overall comparison of the two teams in terms of their stats. I won't do a deep dive on that. I'll leave that up there. If there's a game you're interested in, you can freeze the video and take a more detailed look. And then I'll probably talk more about the core four stats, as I find that the easiest way to break it down quickly in my mind. As always, before we start, if you enjoy the content, then please like and subscribe to the video. All right, let's get into this. There's a lot to talk about. So the first game, Iowa State at Michigan. This game is at South Bend. Michigan is minus 2.5. The over-under, I can't read it. I think it's 149.5. If you're keen on the over-unders, then take what each team scores per 100 possessions, divide that by 100, and then multiply it times pace on how many possessions they have per game, and that will help give you an idea of what each team should score and what their combined score should be. Iowa State beat Princeton. They came back in the second half and just sort of wore down Princeton. And this game versus Michigan, these teams have a lot of similarities if you look at the numbers. So let's go to the core four. So their offensive rating, they're both 107 points per 100 possession. Their effective field goal shooting percentage, Michigan 51, Iowa State 54. The biggest differences seem to be offensive rebound percentage. So Michigan gets after the offensive rebound boards, getting 34%. Versus Iowa State that gets 26%. The thing that Iowa State does, they get to the free throw line. I imagine that's Audie Crooks. So they get to the line 33% of the time of their offensive possessions. That's 89th percentile versus Michigan, 27% and 52nd percentile. In terms of defense, the most glaring thing is Michigan gets more turnovers, 21%, which is 78th percentile versus Iowa State, who does not turn over. Teams basically 16% of their opponent's possessions end in turnover. The one thing Iowa State does well is they don't foul on defense, only fouling 23% of the possessions, putting the opponent on the line versus Michigan, that's 28%. So with this one, if forced to make a bet, and I wouldn't bet on this game, but if forced to do it, I would put my money on Iowa State and getting the 2.5 points. It'll be fun this will be a few of the Big 12 going versus the Big 10. The next one is, once again, the Big 10 going versus the Big 12. That is Indiana versus Utah. This game is at Columbia, South Carolina. Indiana is minus 1.5. When I look at their numbers, and these are full season stats on the core four, Utah just comes off the page to me. So net rating, Utah, obviously they play in the Big 12 versus the Big 10. That's sort of the grudge match here. Utah's plus 19. Then offensive rating, Utah's 108 comparison to Indiana, 102. They have a better efficient field goal shooting percentage. They're a better offensive rebounders at 31% versus Indiana, 22%. Turnovers are pretty much equal. Utah's slightly higher than Indiana at 19 versus 18%. And then defensive rating. So Utah's defense, they give up less points per 100 possession, 89 to Indiana's 93. Effective field goal shooting of opponents for Utah is 46% versus Indiana's slightly better, holding opponents to 45%. The other one, turnovers, Utah causes more turnovers at 21%, which is 76th percentile versus Indiana, only 17%. And Utah fouls less at 23% versus Indiana at 26%. So obviously with this game, I am going with Utah, but this will be one of those that helps determine the strength of the conference And you can only take the number so far in a one and done. So I'm not guaranteeing this one. But yeah, I would have thought Utah would have been favored in this game. And Utah, if I just put the jinx on you and you get blown out, I'm very, very sorry. The next game will be Big Ten action on SEC. Let's see who's better. Oregon's the number 10 seed, Vanderbilt the number 7 seed. Vanderbilt is a minus 5.5 favorite. The over-under is 44.5. And I'm going with Vandy to cover. Just looking at all their numbers are better. And that's in the SEC. So their net rating is plus 19.8 versus Oregon 7.7. Offense is just out of control at 112 points per 100 possession. That's 98 percentile versus Oregon 98 per 100 possession. Efficient field goal shooting, they're efficient at 50% versus 46%. Offensive rebounding as well. They get busy on the boards, which is 93 percentile, as they get 37% of their missed shots or offensive rebounded. And turnovers are less than Oregon. Yeah, I'm definitely liking Vanderbilt, but you never know until they throw the ball up. On offense, Oregon slightly better defensive net rating at 91 versus 92. Field goal shooting percentage, efficient field goal shooting percentage. Vanderbilt opponents shoot 48.5%, which is 21 percentile, so that's pretty low, versus Oregon that's 46 percentile. Offensive rebounds, Vanderbilt gives up offensive rebounds on defense 35%, which is 10th percentile. My counter to that is the SEC, and they're playing LSU, and they're probably getting brutalized, and Ole Miss and all those other teams like Texas versus Oregon. They're 52 percentile at 30% they give up. But yeah, I think SEC will steal Vanderbilt to hold up on the boards. I'm curious to see what that is after the game. Turnovers are fairly equal, and then free throw fouling opponents, that's equal as well. 23% for Vanderbilt. Percent of time they put opponents on the line versus 24% for Oregon. So yeah, I am going with Vanderbilt and will give up the 5.5 points. I think Vanderbilt will control this game and get on top of Oregon. The next game is Nebraska versus Louisville. Nebraska is a 10 seed, Louisville a 7 seed. The game is at Fort Worth, Texas, at TCU's building. Louisville is minus 2.5. The over-under is 146.5. Much like Indiana versus Utah, I was surprised by Utah being the underdog. With this one, looking at the numbers, I'm surprised Nebraska is the underdog to Louisville. I don't know if it's because Louisville's a public team or not, or is this shade on the Big Ten versus the ACC? I'm not sure, but if you look at net rating, Louisville 6.9 versus Nebraska 10.9. Offensive rating, Louisville 101 per 100 possession versus Nebraska scoring 108 points per 100 possession. Nebraska has a better effective field goal shooting percentage at 51%. Offensive rebounding percentage, that's the one. Louisville gets on the boards at 38%. That's 95 percentile versus Nebraska 33%. Turnovers, Louisville's higher at 18% versus Nebraska that's 17%. And that's good for Nebraska. They don't turn over the ball that much. And then getting to the free throw line, Nebraska gets to the free throw line more. When you look at defensive rating, both of these teams aren't elite on defense. Louisville giving up 95 points per 100 possession, and Nebraska 97 points per 100 possession. Effective field goal shooting, Louisville's is worse at 49% versus Nebraska 47%. Offensive rebounds given up to opponents, so Louisville's worse in that statistic. 31% of their opponents' misses get offensive rebounded by their opponents versus 27% for Nebraska. Turnover creation, Louisville's better at creating turnovers at 23%. It'll be interesting. Will they be able to turn over Nebraska? Because Nebraska generally holds on to the ball well, versus Nebraska doesn't cause many turnovers at 17%. And then fouling, Louisville's a Hackosaurus. They have 31%. Their opponents get to the free throw line 31% of the possessions that they have, versus Nebraska only 25%. So you know where I'm going with this one. Yeah, I think Nebraska. I would pick Nebraska and happy to take the points, or getting the points of minus 2.5. I am a bit conflicted on this game. I want my prediction to be right. So if Louisville wins by only 1 point, I would be really happy as my prediction is right, but as well, it'll line up for Haley Van Lith going against Jeff Walls in Louisville, which would be fun to see. Now, the last one I have is number 12 Ball State versus number 5 Ole Miss. Ole Miss is minus 12.5. I just want to see this game. I think the key will be how much does Ole Miss kill Ball State on the boards. Ole Miss rebounds 41% of their misses on offense. That's 98th percentile. The other thing, I just think Ole Miss will be able to be physical with them. I'm really tempted to take the point and go with Ball State, but I can't do it. I'm taking Ole Miss to cover the 12.5 spread, as I suspect Ball State's going to pay for Maryland grabbing the Ole Miss home game and being the 16 seed. I think Ole Miss would be quite happy to run up the score a little bit and make a bit of a statement for the committee. Now, the other games I'll touch on briefly. Number 13, Montana State versus Ohio State. Ohio State's minus 14.5. The over-under is 138.5. Obviously, this game's at Columbus, Ohio. I expect Ohio State to win. I do note that Northern Arizona, they hold on to the ball pretty well, only turning over the ball only 15.4%, which is 95 percentile. And funny enough, Ohio State turns opponents over 25%, which is 95 percentile. So I'm curious in that game. Something has to give. I am going to take the points and go Montana State. I don't think they will go down by more than 14.5 points, but we will see. I definitely wouldn't bet on this game. The next one is South Florida at Tennessee. That game's obviously at Tennessee. The point spread, Tennessee is minus 19.5. The over-under is 146.5. I think 19.5 points, that's too many points to give to South Florida. The question is, does Tennessee come out with new live and fresh legs and just dominate? I'm curious to see it. The game I really want to see is Ohio State versus Tennessee. That will be an interesting matchup, and that's the main reason I'm keeping my eye on Ohio State and Tennessee in these early games. Just want to see what they look like before they match up. I cannot stress enough, don't put the college fund on my picks. These are for entertainment purposes only. Just a bit of fun. The real purpose of this video was just giving you some background numbers on these teams and letting you know what the spreads are if you're interested. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed the video. Let me know as well, do you like this format and me going through these numbers this way? Because I don't think it's out there. But on the other hand, I do worry that it's a little bit too dry. So as always, your comments, your poison, it's all welcome. Let's get on to the games. We'll be back to review them after they happen. Thanks a lot for watching.